So we do have a quorum. There are four of us, four of you, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 5 o'clock. So for the purposes of the record, this is a regular meeting of the Board of Finance. Today is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. In the City Hall auditorium, I have board members Lance Boynton and Christopher Bayes. And participating by Zoom, I have Jim Wright and Lorene Pesky. So with that, I'll jump right into our agenda. Item number 1, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the regular meeting held December 15th, 2020.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
And seconded by, I heard Mr. Boynton. And are there questions on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 2 on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of the Board of Public Safety to authorize the reallocation of funds in the amount of $4,174.26 from contingency for the replacement of 8 tires on the Drakeville Volunteer Fire Department's tanker fire apparatus in accordance with the National Fire Protection Association safety standards for emergency response vehicles. Before I call that motion, it's 8 tires. It's actually on the city of Torrington's tanker that's maintained by the Drakeville Volunteer Fire Department. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second. Mr. Wright.
Seconded by Mr. Wright. Thank you. All right, so
Mayor, it's Laureen. Should we change the wording then?
yes, so the motion actually reads to accept the recommendation of the Board of Public Safety to authorize the reallocation of funds in the amount of $4,174.26 from contingency for the replacement of the 8 tires on the city-owned tanker fire apparatus maintained by Drakeville Volunteer Fire Department in accordance with National Fire Protection Association safety standards for emergency response vehicles, contingent on City Council's approval. So, Mr. Bayes, that's the motion you,
So, yep, so moved.
okay, good. And Mr. Wright, you're okay with that motion?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ms. Pesky. All right, so I asked Chief Towie, and I think we have Chief Macklis on the phone as well. No, just Chief Towie. So Chief, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, and I know Chief Macklis was going to try to get on both these meetings. But basically, so Drakeville operates, the Tanker 38 is a tanker apparatus that carries 3,000 gallons of water for those non-hydrated areas or situations where we may have issues with our water supply. It is a city purchased and city owned vehicle that is operated by the Drakeville Volunteer Fire Department under a memorandum of understanding. That memorandum of understanding does have them, responsible for routine maintenance and upkeep of the apparatus. This is a situation where just based upon their current budget situation and their funding situation, they're not able to absorb the shock of this purchase. So basically what happened is there's actually 10 tires on the apparatus. A little while ago, 2 of the tires got punctured and they had to get them replaced, at which point it was identified that those tires had exceeded the 7-year lifespan requirement based upon the National Fire Protection Association emergency response safety standards, and thus needed to be replaced. So that standard basically for emergency response vehicles, especially with vehicles, 3,000 gallons of water, you're talking about a lot of weight moving down the road, a huge safety concern, and wheels and tires and braking is a big concern for all apparatus, but especially when you have that much weight moving around. So it was determined that all those tires were beyond that, industry best practice, nationally accepted safety standard and would need replaced. So, it's a little over $4,000. They just do not have it in their budget to be able to absorb that cost. And this is obviously an unbudgeted expense that we didn't have the ability to slide funds into. So We're hoping and seeking support to be able to get those tires replaced to bring that back up into compliance with safety standards, to ensure the safety of, both the responding members of Drakeville and the public obviously going down the road.
Thank you, Chief. Are there questions?
We have the money in contingency.
So yes, and Alice is here. I know, I expected that would come up, especially at this board meeting. So contingency line item, we have sufficient funds? Except, did we do the 16,000 for,
Youth Service Bureau?
yeah, Youth Service Bureau? Right. No, that's fine. So yeah, Alice has confirmed that what we had budgeted for this year in contingency was the $150,000. And the only expenditure to date that has come out of that account was $16,000 for the Torrington Youth Service Bureau. So we are still at $134,000 in that line item.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
see
Mayor.
no issue with it. I think obviously it's money well spent. It's money that has to be spent in order to keep a fire apparatus on the road. So, yeah, I think it has to be done.
Other questions or comments? And the only thing that I would add, and Chief Tower, you may have a better recollection of the conversation, because the actual miles that these tires have been driven were much lower than the other concern being the age of the tires. I think the Board of Safety wanted us also to see if there was any other reuse of those tires within the city once they are replaced.
So I did reach out to equipment maintenance with the tire sizes that were going to be replaced. And unfortunately, it doesn't sound like they're the size or configuration of anything they'd be able to use. I do think it's still important when we do it to see if there's any trade-in ability or repurposing those tires, because they are relatively low on overall mileage. It's really just the age of the tire and the concerns when you get into those older tires. So, I mean, we will definitely continue to seek a home for those tires and get some use out of them, but.
So
Could be a really cool tree swing for some grandchildren somewhere.
There is
These
one
are-
thing. There is one thing that maybe Chief, one day, in the next year or two, or even throughout this budget process, we talk about is, obviously the maintenance of that. You said under a memorandum of understanding is that Drakeville assumes those maintenance costs, but with a decrease in funding over, the past few years, and especially this past year with the limited ability to fundraise. Maybe it's something that we should reconsider how the maintenance is, considered for that. Because, we don't want, I would hate to see them have to decide between putting a maintenance item into the truck or buying SCBA gear for their firefighters or, things like that. So maybe that's something that we consider moving forward in the, budget process this year, next year, that, the understanding that we know that funds are limited there, especially with fundraising. So, maybe something, especially if it's the city's own truck. I know that was the understanding put in place back in 2012, 11 when the truck went in, but obviously things have changed since then. So maybe something we can consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I mean, we do view it because it's a city-owned apparatus. I think we differentiate that a little different. But you will see that as we're drafting the 2021, 2022 budget requests. We are looking at that and looking at those capital costs and what the sustainable costs are for those departments. So I'm working with both those departments to sort of look at what those costs are, obviously being forthright with them of, we need to identify what those really costs are and then determine if there's the ability to fund. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the chief? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries. All right,
Thank you.
3, I will entertain a motion to accept the city's financial reports.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Pesky,
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Bayes. Questions on the financials? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I'm sorry.
I,
I don't know if that was a good time for the question. Sorry about that.
that's right.
Are we going to get a presentation of the audit report that we received at the beginning of the month
Yes.
from Blanchard Bureau? Do you know when that is? Closer to? Okay. Okay. Yeah, just because there's some things in those reports that, you know, I know I had questions about and stuff. So,
Yeah, I've got
Okay.
a page of notes on that as well.
okay.
So getting some clarification.
Nothing for you. Nothing that, you know, nothing I don't think that you, you may have answers to these questions, but nothing for you specific, you know, you in the city specifically.
And I know in the past, because those audit reports always land right around the time that we're heading into the budget, we have even held off on that presentation until after the budget has really been put to bed. But if there are questions that really you wish to address, we could certainly get that done before we get too far along in the budget process.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
All right. All right, we'll work on that then. All right, moving into item number 4, I'll entertain a motion to accept the Board of Education's financial reports.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Second.
A second by Mr. Bayes. Are there questions on the financial reports?
Yes, I'm looking at the COVID expenses
Yes.
that they forwarded. It was the beginning of the front of that. So it looks like to date, we've accrued about just shy of 1.3 million. And they've got a grant that only covers about 44% of that. Are there going to be other recourses that we can pursue through the state or other means to try to make up the other 66%? Yeah, this is Board of Ed. That's $574,000, I believe.
Out of the additional 10 million or 15 million that they're supposed to be getting. They had a few different sources of revenue for the BOE. Were there COVID expenses?
Yeah, I'd just like to get some clarification, basically just on the document that they sent over. Yeah, we're going to be $700,000 shy.
I mean, that's just the latest one we got. I mean, there could be an update, but that's what latest we got.
It is available on the website, the electronic.
Mayor, we can't hear what the,
Discussion is.
It's probably, did you hear Lance ask the
Yes.
question about the
Yes.
Board of Ed expenses?
Yes.
yeah,
All right.
Alice
so-
and John, we couldn't hear.
Yeah, she's sitting way in the back of the room, socially distanced times 10. If you want to sit over there and talk into the mic. So I'm going to relay what Alice was saying. So this document here is not the official, I know they're tracking these expenses in an Excel spreadsheet. But it's my understanding that they have not reported these expenses into that COVID line item that we set up. So to the best of my knowledge, they are paying these expenses out of their operating budget at this time. So to your point, will we get reimbursed for these? We're certainly doing everything we can to make sure that any reimbursable expenses are being submitted to FEMA through the CARES Act, through the CRF and the ESSERF. That was the ESSERF fund. I think you really have to wait until the end of the year to find out what's actually going to end up happening. Even for the city with the CRF funding, we have been tracking our expenses. We have roughly $160,000, $180,000 of expenses that we tracked through the COVID line item that the Board of Finance established, but through the CRF fund received $528,000 to reimburse us. So it's one of those things where right now it's all very much a moving target. They just extended the CRF funding and expenditures through December 31st of 2021. But again, when you look at those $1.6 million, I do believe they are paying all of those expenses out of their operating budget at this time.
Is there any reason they're doing that instead of putting it into the line item that we established to create transparency for that?
I don't know. We certainly can reach out to them and ask if they can help us understand that.
Because I guess that was my understanding of the whole reason for the creation of that is to maintain that level of transparency so the back end auditing would be a lot easier. And, you know, like I said, I get it. Everybody's doing what they have to do,
Right.
but sooner or later, you know, it's a number with a big comma in it.
Yes, too many commas.
Yeah, it's got
Yeah.
7 digits.
I can certainly reach out and see if the Board of Education can forward a memo with an explanation or, you know, there's communication that's going back and forth all the time between Alice's office and their business office. We can certainly pose the question as to, you know, what their strategy is in tracking all of this stuff. I am trying to also pull together a joint meeting. I know Ms. Pesky asked for a joint meeting with the Board of Ed and our delegation. Unfortunately, timing is everything, and delegation had session today and couldn't make it. But we could certainly add this as one of those agenda items at that meeting so that we can get clarification on what is the strategy moving forward. So we're clearly understanding what this virus cost
Right.
us as a city and as a school district, and what we actually did receive reimbursement for, which, as you said, was the goal of establishing that line item. So we can add that. Other questions or comments on the BOE financial reports? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 5, I will entertain a motion to consider business by the department head in the room.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
And Mr. Boynton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And is there anything you wanted to add, Alice?
Oh, we do have the chief too, Mayor.
Okay.
I thought
Chief Towie, anything you wanted to add this evening?
No, just thanks for the support on the purchase of the tires for the tanker. So appreciate it.
Thank you. And anything from the city clerk's office? Okay.
I saw
Then item 6, I'll entertain a motion to consider business by the mayor and members of the Board of Finance.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second.
And second by Mr. Boynton. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? And we'll start with the Zoom participants. Mr. Wright, anything this evening?
not really. I'm just wondering, as budget season comes around, how the income stream is looking. I know there was some new businesses coming to town, new manufacturing down by Stop and Shop. Is any of that moving forward? Is there anything we can look forward to there?
So the new owner of that Hendy/Stone Container property is doing quite a bit of construction over there. Their timeline is that they hoped by the end of the year that they would have their manufacturing business up and running. But at this point, it is still a lot of empty warehouse and empty building. So no additional revenues to speak of from that. All right, Ms. Pesky, anything this evening?
I do have a couple of questions, Mayor. Can you explain what the peddler going into receivership, how that could be successful in moving that project along?
Oh, sure. Okay, so just first a little look back and then an optimistic look forward. As you all know, that this piece of property has been a little problematic for the city of Torrington. It was purchased by the current owner out of bankruptcy in 2014. I think it was November of 2014. And by mid 2015, it came to our attention that there were expenditure or budget deficits, financial gaps that this owner was experiencing in his plan to redevelop the entire property. By then, the property had been significantly demoed, and we had this property on our radar, paying very close attention to what was going on. And while the inn itself was demoed, the pub and the commercial spaces on the first floor were still very viable. It was in mid 2016 and early 2017 when the last tenants moved out of the commercial space that the concern about fire code and building code became apparent. And the city commenced enforcement proceedings, notifying this property owner that they had an obligation to protect the building, which is now vacant, completely vacant. And after a series of attempts to gain their compliance on those code deficiencies, we then brought in the state fire marshal to take a look at the building from that lens, to make sure that we weren't missing anything or that we were not overthinking anything. The state fire marshal confirmed everything that the local fire marshals had been attempting to enforce. And we reached a point with the property owner that it became necessary for us to pursue the matter as a criminal matter, and had we had the local party, the local principal of the LLC, arrested for non-compliance in that fire code. That criminal matter has been pending for a year, actually a little over a year. It's been 14 months now. And in that time between the commencement of the criminal proceedings and now, there was a new law that went into effect. And Ms. Pesky, I think you even asked me about this law last year. It's called, it's PA 19-92. I think the CGS statute number is 8-169 AA, where a property that has been considered abandoned or is blighted, a municipality or a party in interest, could be a neighbor within 1,000 feet. It could be a development agency within the municipality that has worked on a redevelopment project. A lien holder or a municipality can petition the court to seek a receivership over the asset. The qualifications for the receivership were pretty restrictive. You had to comply with four of the requirements for abandonment. You know, nobody had been living in the building for 12 months. The building had not been marketed at a fair market price within the last 60 days prior to the petition. That there was a threat of fire safety. And then in the fourth, there were 8 other conditions that of the 8, 3 of them had to be proven, and the court had to agree that they were qualifications that pertain to the building. Of the 8 that are listed in that statute, this property qualifies for all 8 of them. So over the last several months, I had been consulting with legal counsel, consulting with the Torrington Development Corporation, had numerous conversations with potential developers, potential property, people that were interested in purchasing the property, with the state historic preservation offices. And at the end of all of that, came to the conclusion that it was really in the best interest of the city and the neighboring and abutting property owners for us to move to the court under this state statute for the appointment of a receiver. Fortunately, Torrington Development Corporation agreed that they were well positioned to be able to take on the role as a receiver. And we will continue working with TDC if they are appointed. This is a legal process. The petition was filed in the court last Friday. It now is up to the court to make the determination that it is an abandoned property based on the statutory definition, and that the TDC is the appropriate receiver. If all of that falls into place the way that we anticipate or hope that it will, it's my intention to work with Torrington Development Corporation to identify the immediate and urgent needs to address the fire code violations and those blighted conditions. You know, the window treatments that are all falling, you know, to the bottom of the window, the unpainted plywood, the broken window, the the peeling paint, all of those things that make it blight. Through that process, work with TDC in assessing and developing a long-term strategy on what is the best path forward for rehabilitation of this property. And that path forward can be a number of things. It can be undertaking the full redevelopment of the property. It can be just stabilizing the building and petitioning the court to terminate the receivership, return it to the property owner in compliance, in which case the city and or Torrington Development Corporation would be reimbursed for any expenses incurred, or a recommendation to the court that the property be sold to a developer that has the capacity to develop the property. So much work to be done ahead, but the first step was filing the petition and getting the court to agree that this piece of property is abandoned and it does require some rather desperate measures.
Is there any timetable on the court's part?
So there is not. You know, this is a new state law that went into effect in January of 2020. Keeping in mind, in January of 2020, this property owner, it was shortly after one of their members had been arrested. And on February 5th, this property owner pulled a building permit. So in January of 2020 through February 2020, through December of 2020, there really wasn't anything the city could do because there had been a demonstration on the part of the property owner to do something with that property. You know, when you get to the 12th month, which was January of 2021, that's the statutory timeline. This law is relatively untested. The only lawsuit that we were able to find has been brought under this statute was a legal proceeding in Hartford, where a developer that was undertaking a development of a neighborhood had one abandoned, blighted piece of property in the middle of his project area that he sought the court's intervention by having himself appointed receiver. His documentation, his petition was filed in June of 2020, and in August of 2020, the court did appoint him to be receiver of that property. So that was approximately 60 days. All of the timelines that we're looking at within the state statute hinge on, you know, whether you have a property owner who's contesting this. In the Hartford case, there was no contest. You know, it was filed. There was no appearance, no pushback. But the first step was getting it to the court and seeking a hearing immediately on the petition so that we can at least start that conversation and get things rolling. I certainly hope within 90 to 120 days, we should have something, some determination or indication from the court as to what the next steps will be.
Thank you. That's was a lot of information.
I know, I apologize, and I've been
No,
living
it's
with it
important to know the background.
Yeah, especially because, when you're trying to deal with code enforcement, it's very challenging. Most property owners, as soon as they get that letter that they must come into compliance, that there are fines that are attributed to non-compliance, that you can be forced criminally into any of these actions. Most property owners come into compliance right away. This is one property owner that just did not come into compliance. And we really were pretty much backed to a wall on this. We certainly did look at eminent domain. For anybody who's familiar with that process, you have to demonstrate a public use or an urgent economic development need. And it isn't just seizing the property, you actually have to purchase the property. And you deposit the purchase price or appraised value of the property into the court, which starts the lawsuit, and then you proceed the legal proceedings or commence the legal proceedings, which if anyone's, I think the landmark case for all of that is the Kilo versus New London.
Yep.
It's not something that gets resolved in 6 months or a year. It's usually many years before there's resolution of that type of proceeding. So this receivership statute is, it's not as drastic a move as eminent domain. It affords a municipality another tool to bring abandoned buildings into compliance, and does not strip the property owner of their rights to property ownership, but any expenses that are incurred in bringing these buildings into compliance or development are reimbursed, became a priority lien against the property, and those expenses are reimbursed first before any interest inures to the property owner.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's actually,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's actually great. It's a great law. I mean, it was written almost like a checklist. You check off these boxes, you qualify. You check off these boxes, this will be the next step. So we're confident that we're doing the right thing for this property, for the neighbors, and for the city.
And I have another question. I understand from your press release about the vaccine distribution will be down at the Armory. Can you share any more information about that?
Oh, sure. So Hartford Healthcare will be the lead agency on the vaccinations out of that location. As everybody knows, the Armory and the city of Torrington is actually owned by the state. We lease it for $1 a year. So when Hartford Healthcare was looking for a location to do mass vaccinations, they lighted on this piece of property. I reached out to State Department of Administrative Services, got their permission to proceed with this use of the facility. It was very much consistent with what the state hopes those types of assets can be mobilized or activated for. Hartford Healthcare will be standing up that location for vaccines the week of the 25th. I think is that next Monday?
Yep.
They're actually doing a dry run or a dress rehearsal on Friday just to see, where people park, how they move through the building. The registration for vaccinations at that location are all done through the Hartford Healthcare system. If you go online to the My Chart, you can register for an appointment for vaccination at that location. Torrington Area Health is also running a vaccination center. They are looking to develop some clinics. Right now, they're Mondays through Fridays during office hours. I think they actually extend a little past regular office hours, but they're also looking in the future to do some clinics so that they can reach, I guess, a larger audience or a larger population with that. It's very difficult. It's difficult in my office to receive phone calls from people that are frustrated because 75 years and older, they don't necessarily have email or access to a computer. They can't register on the VAMS system. They're relying on the phone system, and they're on hold for 90 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5 hours before they're prompted to leave a message and that somebody will get back to them. So it has been a little bit challenging for the number of people that are trying to register to get through so that they can register. But that's essentially where we are with that right now. And I'm reminded that Chief Towie's on the call. I don't know, is there anything I missed, Chief?
No, I think you covered it. The frustrations are there. It is getting better. They are bringing on systems to especially assist with that, 75 and older, or the older population that may not have access to some of that technology. I would urge, and our hope is that family and friends are able to assist those individuals as well to sort of bridge that divide. There's a strong push, and they really are focusing on that older population, 75 and up right now. And that's who they're really focusing on getting scheduled. So the hope is that with everything coming on, both between the Armory, the continuing efforts with Torrington Area Health, that you're going to see, dramatically increased capacity out here. And the hope is we can get the right vaccines in the right arms. So as we go through this, I think this is going to be, months. This isn't going to be days and weeks as a project nationally. I just urge patience and, support of our fellow neighbors. And, if you can sort of support someone that's in one of those high risk populations and help them, be much appreciated. I know by them, but also by everyone sort of doing their best efforts. And I'd be remiss if I just didn't thank Charlotte and Torrington Area Health have been such incredible community partners and have really been lead agencies and taken a lot on their shoulders and have been doing a great job in a very difficult situation.
Mayor, do you expect any financial impact on the city from this distribution at the Armory?
No, I don't. We obviously brought in Chief Towie as an emergency management director. Chief Baldwin, it was actually Captain Gonzalez and Captain Barone that have been taking the lead on coordination efforts. We anticipated, would there be a need for some traffic controls in the location? We will definitely be playing all of that by ear and respond accordingly. But we're not displacing anything by having this at the Armory. Our Parks and Rec offices will still be open and accessible to the public to the extent that, that we're encouraging that given the current pandemic response. But I don't see that there's going to be a great expense, but if there is any expense, obviously we're going to report it to that COVID-19 line item. And those CRF funds that I spoke of earlier would be the funds that would cover those expenses.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sure. Is that it?
Yes,
I forgot we're in the,
I'm
the
done.
members' comments. All right, so locally, anything, Mr. Bayes?
No, I think obviously we're coming into a budget season, so we'll all be working extra hard as we always do. Are we going to, obviously, subcommittee meetings probably going to be virtual? I'm assuming.
So in this pandemic response, as we all know, last year we had a truncated process. Our budget subcommittee met once, and then we had to pivot. I'm thinking this year, it's not much better. We're still doing many of our meetings by Zoom. It may be the year that we return to, just taking these budgets right to the various boards directly. The safety budgets, capital plans, my intention is to go right to the Board of Safety with those budgets, do a complete review at that Board of Safety level, and let them recommend it to the City Council. I would encourage Board of Finance and City Council members to also participate by Zoom in those budget deliberations, so that they're hearing the same things as what's being discussed at those board levels. I think it may eliminate a few meetings for some people, and it may increase some meetings for some of the boards. But under the circumstances, I just think going directly to the boards this year is probably prudent and the best use of everybody's resources and time.
Okay. So maybe John and Carol can cue us in on all those meetings when they're happening.
Absolutely. I'll be developing this week a full budget review schedule that I will share. And February 15th is when the budgets that are submitted by the department heads will be sent to the Board of Finance members. So you'll already have all of the budget proposals as they've been submitted to be able to walk through as the boards review them. All right, anything else? Is that it?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boynton?
Well, we talked about having that Blum Shapiro review, at some point. Just reading through, some of the things are a little bit concerning about the encumbrances, for example, from the Board of Ed. So there's a couple things in here that they seem to have popped up a couple times over the last few years. And is there a way to get some root cause analysis and some timeline and some true recommendations on how the Board of Ed is actually going to alleviate these issues moving forward? I'm just looking at the complication of a very expensive new build. The accounting practices are going to get more complicated, and reading through the recommendations here have me a little concerned. Let's put it that way.
Well, I can speak to the issue. Excuse me, I don't know.
Alice is coming to the mic.
Don't look at me.
It's important if she's going to the mic.
I can speak to the issue that existed with the Board of Ed encumbrances. They had turnover in staff,
Okay.
and some of the staff that was there before had gone through some year-end processes, and the year-end processes they were dated for the wrong year.
Okay.
So we had to go back, and we all worked together. The city and the BOE worked together to reverse all of those issues that existed with those encumbrances, and they were corrected. That issue is resolved, I would hope, moving forward. The new staff is getting a very strong education on how the encumbrance process works. So I think that issue would be resolved. I don't know what other issues you have.
So the
concerned.
one-sided accounting?
Well, that was part of the encumbrance issue.
Okay.
That they were
It's
doing,
just-
they were doing some adjustments that were one-sided, and with the encumbrance piece, that doesn't work.
Yeah, no,
Actually, it
that's-
doesn't work in accounting at all.
No.
Yes, so I think that those issues have been resolved as well, but we certainly can get more clarity from the auditors if you need that.
Will there be some kind of a follow-up to ensure that those practices have gone away, and some assurance moving forward that this isn't going to pop up?
We can certainly reach out. I can certainly reach out to the Board of Education and get some kind of how am I going to put this? Get some kind of additional documentation for you, or additional background behind
Yeah,
what
I'm
happened.
looking
and
for
what's
some
been
kind of a
fixed.
corrective action.
Yeah,
You know, this
yes.
for me personally kind of really does move up a pretty significant priority list,
Thank you for
knowing what's
the,
coming.
yes, your verbiage is absolutely correct. The plan of corrective action, it was just escaping me. Because we have provided that before for other issues that existed. So absolutely. I can get
Excellent.
something from
And I
you.
think that plan of corrective action has a timeline. They're supposed to develop that plan and submit it in writing within a certain timeframe. Did
Well,
they?
that plan of typically the plan of corrective action would be something that would be submitted to the state.
Right.
If there was a problem with the grants, this wasn't a problem so much with the grants as it was with just the accounting practices, but we certainly can submit that to the Board of Finance if they request that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
I would second that.
Okay.
Thank
If you
you.
have any other questions on the financials too, I'm available to help you with that. Questions on the numbers or whatever. Yeah.
I appreciate, I know you are trying to retire, so the longer
Oh,
that
was
we
she?
can keep you
Jeez.
here, I think I'll speak for myself, the happier I'll be. But I do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well said. I appreciate that. All right, if there are no other questions, we'll move right into adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bayes.
Second, Mr. Wright.
And a second by Mr. Wright. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. I'll be sending that budget schedule out in the next week, so stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.